And now, here's your host, Alessandra Torresani.
Liz, I'm very, very, very excited to be having this interview. And I actually saw you on the Today Show because that is my favorite show. I'm obsessed with Hoda and I'm obsessed with Jenna. So we have to get into that a little bit later because I can't wait to hear everything about them. I'm like, what do they smell like? Everything. Like, anyway,
they smell good.
I'm just like their biggest fan. It's like my dream to be on that show. So you have fulfilled my dreams. But I'm just so thrilled. Your name actually has been circulating in my orbit, if you will, for a while now through different people. So I was so excited when someone from your team reached out. This is just such a thrill for me. Liz, how did you start this empire? Because truly this is you've created this entire empire from your TikTok, from Instagram, from books, from having a podcast, giving such great advice to so many people. And this podcast, if you don't know anything about it, I live with bipolar 1 disorder, and it started out as kind of my journey of I didn't want to feel alone, because I feel that's something that anyone who's lived with a mental illness or just dealt with mental health or just as a human being in person, this is something that we deal with, feeling alone and dealing with anxiety and stress. And it's kind of evolved into, what it is today. But I want to know, how did you start out to then become Liz Moody today?
Yeah, so probably very similar to you. For me, it was really born out of personal necessity. I've been a journalist for well over a decade. My first writing job was as a teenager. I pitched a newspaper column to my local newspaper, and I was like, you should have a column for teenagers, and it should be written by me. And they were like, okay. It's really one of my life mottos is never be the one to say no to yourself. Always let somebody else say no to you, because often it will be a yes, even when it's unexpected. So that was one of my first embodiments of that motto. And that column ended up being nationally syndicated, and it ran in newspapers all over the country. So I've been writing for a really long time. But then about 7-8 years ago, I moved to England with my now husband, and he was doing graduate school at the time. And I was so excited. I've traveled my entire life. I've always fancied myself as somebody who's very comfortable in foreign environments. I've backpacked South America by myself, spent a ton of time in Europe by myself, all these things. I love it. So I was like, I'm going to thrive. I did not thrive.
Wow.
I had essentially a complete mental breakdown, and not in the cute way that people say they had a mentee be these days. I became completely agoraphobic. I ended up having panic attacks whenever I got out of bed. And I spent months essentially bedbound. And in that time, the only skill that I really knew to rely on, my only safe space, was that journalism background. Right. And so I started reaching out to experts, people that I had no right to reach out to, and ask, what is happening when I'm having these panic attacks? What is the root of this anxiety? What's happening in my body? And what can I do to begin to change the way that I feel? And I reached out to the head of neuroscience at Stanford. I reached out to all these Harvard, Yale people, all these people who, I had no right to reach out to. And 95% of them did not respond. But the 5% who did started to give me an understanding of what was happening. And they started to give me tools to begin to deal with what was happening. And then I started to feel a little bit better day after day after day as I began to implement these tools. And that's when I was like, I need to share these tools, not only for anxiety, but there are so many
life lessons,
science-backed ways, that we can really transform our lives, even if we're at the lowest of lows. I truly had panic attacks whenever I got out of bed. I thought I was going to live the rest of my life in bed, and I won't ever stop saying that, because when I was in that place, I was so eager to hear stories of people who had been where I was and who were doing better now, so I could have that sense of hope. So I want to be that for other people. I want to say, if you are at the lowest of lows, there is hope for you. I am living proof. And there are so many science-backed ways that people can transform their lives. So it's become my mission to share that with people.
The first time that you had a panic attack, I remember the first time I had a panic attack, because I get, and to be fair, I still get them, I still,
same.
I think that's what's really hard for people to wrap their head around if they've never had a panic attack or they don't understand what it feels like. first of all, it feels like you're having a stroke and you're having a heart attack and you're dying and you don't understand what's going
I've
on,
gone to the hospital for
Yeah.
them before because I've been unsure about what was happening in Finland. I went to the hospital because I was so sure that something significantly was wrong with my
Wow.
body. And the woman at the hospital gave me like a paper bag to breathe into and was like, she was like, girly,
You're like,
you're having a panic attack.
thanks, ma'am. I appreciate that. Thanks for making me feel really
It
cool.
did help. Yeah.
It does help.
But I was like spiraling in the emergency room and I was like, somebody's got to see me
Right?
quickly. Like,
Well, and the thing is like you don't know. And it's so hard to explain to somebody like what you're feeling because for you, you feel like you're dying. You feel like if someone does not help you out in the immediate, that it's going to be all over. And, I
Yeah.
still, have these panic attacks. And I know I've done the research. I've talked to the scientists, like I've done it all. And you walk through like the logical thing, right? It's like my fear of flying. Like I walk through the logic, but it's still like there's still that little bit of a part of you that like pulls you down and it's like, no, I'm gonna get you. But what is something for someone who maybe just experienced a panic attack or is just experiencing that feeling? What was one piece of advice that really helped you? Like for instance, like for me, I think meditation and getting my brainwave in theta really is something that helps me so much when I'm having a panic attack. Is just the breathing, the in and out, the breath work. Was there something that maybe a scientist told you or anyone told you that you were like, oh, this is my quick fix that helps in the
in the actual
yes,
moment.
not in the
Yeah,
long
for
run,
sure.
in the immediate, yeah.
No, in the long run, I will say that I want to just shout out movement
Yeah.
because movement, exercise has been shown in study after study after study to be the single most effective way to deal with anxiety. And that was also really helpful for me because I used to frame movement and exercise all about how my body looked.
Right.
And when I switched framing it to being about how it would impact my anxiety, it had a huge difference. It made a huge difference in my motivation and in my ability to stick to
Sure.
doing movement. And then when I was finally able to stick to a movement routine, that decreased my anxiety on a daily basis more than anything else that I've
Sure.
done. So I want to shout that out for a long-term thing. In the moment, the thing that helps me the most is a little counterintuitive and it's leaning into my
Oh,
anxiety.
brilliant.
I did this podcast about stress with Dr. Alyssa Epple, and she's one of the world's leading researchers on the subject of stress. And she was talking about how with stress and with a lot of these things that feel really heavy in our lives, picture a big boulder there and you have a big rope around the boulder and you're pulling on that boulder and you're pulling on that boulder and you're pulling on that boulder. The thing that's causing you as much pain as the boulder in your path is pulling on that
Sure.
rope. You have your rope burns, your arms are getting tired, your shoulders are getting tired. And she talks about the concept of dropping the rope. The boulder will still be there. We're not saying to have toxic positivity. We're
No.
not saying your entire life is going to shift. We're saying you resisting what is causing you distress that does not need to be there. So she uses that metaphor for stress. She's a caretaker herself and deals with, a lot of really hard life circumstances. And those aren't going to go away. But when we drop the resistance to those life circumstances, it can free up a lot of space. So I find in my moments of having a panic attack, instead of scanning my whole body, asking, why is this happening? What should I be doing? Trying to push it away. If I can say, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now. I've felt this way before. I've been okay. I'll feel this way now. I'll be okay. I'll feel this way again and I'll be okay. And just really leaning into it. And counterintuitively, that's been the thing that's been most helpful for making it dissipate.
Oh, I think I agree with that. And it's so funny because I actually learned that from my husband because he would suffer from really bad panic attacks. And the first time that I had one in front of him I was fighting it, right? I was like resisting it. I was doing the boulder thing, and it was making it worse and exacerbating the situation, which was not necessary at all. And I remember one time I was on the freeway with him, and that's when I got the panic attack. And he was like, just let it be. Like, just know that it's happening. It's going to go over your body. You're still going to continue driving. If you need to pull over for a second, you can, but it's going to be fine. Like just let
Yeah.
it be. Like, and
Good for
it
him.
was the thing that really truly helped him in those moments of like knowing it's going to be okay. And I kind of lean into that now with my fear of flying, because I have a daughter with me with that I fly with, and it makes it even worse because I don't want to create a fear for her, right? And out of nowhere, like give this toddler a fear. So I have to go, okay, it's going to be bumpy. This is going to happen. Like just like you're saying, exactly the same advice. And it's true. It helps so much if you just lean in and let it happen, and it actually goes away so much quicker. Like,
100%. It's so funny that you say that with flying because I've been overcoming a fear of flying for a very long time. I talk about it a lot on my channels. I have a whole podcast episode called something like Overcome Fear of Flying. If you search that, you
I'm going
can
to find
find
it.
it. But a lot of people find it very helpful. But it's been a lifelong thing for me. I think because when I was a kid, my parents were divorced and I would fly between
Oh,
them
wow.
and by myself. And so all of my earliest memories on a plane are me like sobbing by myself on a plane and
Oh,
feeling so
baby
scared and so alone. I'm like
Liz.
5 years old. Yeah, no, it was not. It wasn't ideal, and I've only begun to put those pieces together as a grown up. But one of the things that I've talked about, I've interviewed so many experts about fear flying because I had to do this book tour
Right?
where I was flying every
Yes.
other day. And I want to live a big life, and that's really important to me, and not letting my fears get in the way of that. And a lot of the experts talk about a similar thing, which is like if you get on the plane and you grip the armrest the whole time and you're so scared and you're listening to every ding and ping and you're
Yeah.
trying to keep the plane afloat with your mind, the plane is going to go up, it's going to land, and you're going to get off. And if you get on the plane and you watch a movie, you read a book, you drink some ginger ale, the plane's going to go up, it's going to land, and you're going to be fine. What you're doing en route isn't changing
Yeah.
anything, but your
But your
experience. It's changing your
experience. Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
It's so funny because my uncle actually is a retired pilot for TWA, and his dad was a pilot, and my aunt was a flight attendant, way back in the day. And so it's like every time I'm around them, they literally go through what every beat means, what every sound, like all this stuff, and I'm still just that fear.
Do you know where yours comes
I
from?
don't that's my problem, is I don't know where it comes from because I was traveling as a kid all the time, perfectly fine. And then I'll tell you this. I don't know 100%. I have a feeling I know where it is. When I had my first panic attack, going back to panic attacks, I was on set of this show called Caprica that I was doing. And it was shooting in Vancouver, and everything was great. And I had my first panic attack, and it was on set. And after that, when I started flying back and forth from Vancouver to LA, I started being a little bit more of a nervous flyer. The turbulence would start, like things would drop.
Mm.
So there was no particular incident, I would say, and I use that in quotes, but there was something that I feel like there was something that was there that has to do with the panic attack on set, wanting to control the situation, something. So, and it's progressively gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And then it got worse because I suffered severe postpartum anxiety. So I think that there's just like a monstrous effect that happened, but something that did help. And I just flew to Disney World, so I know that my flying was a lot better when I know that the destination's better. But I started doing neurofeedback therapy, and that has helped me so significantly. I don't know if you know anything about neurofeedback therapy, but it's something that I highly recommend to people.
So it's really interesting that you say the thing about Disney World because one of the tricks people use for fear of flying to trick our brain into enjoying the experience is picturing the good thing on the other side. So
Oh,
when you're coming home, it can be like, oh, my bed's going to feel so
yeah,
good. I'm so excited to see my pet. If you're going on a trip, it can be picturing the Disney World
sure.
or the restaurants you're going to eat at or exploring the new place or ordering room service in the hotel, whatever it is, but actually flooding your brain with the thought of the thing you're excited about can override some of the stress and the
Wow.
anxiety of the flight. So you can lean in even more to the Disney
Oh
World
my
thing.
God. Well, I'm definitely going to pretend that I'm going to Disney World every single time, I think, now that I'm flying. But I was really lucky because the neurofeedback definitely, while it
Yeah.
didn't
So
go
what did you
away.
do
Well,
specifically?
long story short, because I talk about it, I feel like all the time, so I don't want to like bore anyone, but I will tell you, I suffered postpartum anxiety. It got really worse after my daughter turned a year old, because I almost got hit by a car when I was pushing her in her little like car. And it triggered as soon as I was feeling better, right? And feeling like myself again, it triggered it. It went back and it started all up again times 100. And I was debilitated. I couldn't leave the bed. And someone had recommended neurofeedback therapy. I went back in there and they have the software, they put the little things on your head and it basically sends these sound waves or something, to your brain, basically creating different neural pathways. So your brain can go, oh, you know what? I'm going to choose to go in this direction. Right. And there's different types of neurofeedback therapy. The one that I did was where you just have conversation with the person that's administering it. Some of it you look at videos, you look at pictures, and it sends it. But I did like a crash course of, I think, 10 um therapy sessions, I think, in like 3 months, which is kind of normal, and I just think that it allowed me to breathe and find a different way instead of always going to the doomsday situation of the plane's going to crash, something's going to happen, there's going to be a takeover, whatever it may be. It allowed me to kind of just go, oh, I'm going to choose the path of it's going to be okay today. And
I love
yeah.
that.
So I still find myself having panic attacks, but I have these tools. I like to have a toolbox and I know which one to pull out. Um, which is something that I want to talk about with you with tools, but it's still hard, right? Because at the end of the day, we're still humans and our mind plays such tricks on us, no matter how much and how much you feel like, oh, I got this. Your brain's still like, that's funny. You don't know anything and I'm going to get you. I mean,
Yeah,
that happens.
100%.
But it's interesting because you talk about tools a lot, and that you have all these tools. What's your like number one tool that you've learned since having your podcast and interviewing all these wonderful people? Tool maybe not even just for your mental health, but for your life in general, of like being a better person or taking care of yourself. Spring has arrived at Dabble and Dollop, and their shop is full of spring and Easter goodies. Great to give as gifts and decorate your Easter baskets with. Dabble and Dollop is offering Easter egg droplets, aka Dabble and Dollop's version of a bath bomb for kiddos. These coconut, honeydew, and lemon flavored bath bombs provide a fun and delicious treat for bath time. Easter egg bottle toppers for your shampoos and conditioners, which can lead to some fun and imaginative bath time story or playtime. Their Easter bundles, great for ready-made Easter gifts, especially great for little ones who just want something bright and fun as a spring treat. Ladies' favorite so far has been the coconut and honeydew combination. We kind of treat it like a science experiment, and we have been having so much fun during bath time. For all seasons, Dabble and Dollop has everything from bath time shampoos, bubble baths, body washes, conditioner, lotions, and bath bombs to bath toys and accessories to sets that let you try out your favorite products. Visit dabblebath.com/emotional today to get 20% off your first order with us. That's DABBLEBATH.com/emotional and get 20% off for being a listener of Emotional Support.
Yeah, I have so many. And it's one of the reasons that I wrote the book in the structure that I wrote the book. It's 100 ways, and they're all, you can read them in like 4 or 5 minutes. They're like 2 to 3 pages long each way. And sometimes people will see it and be like, oh my gosh, that's so intimidating. Do I have to do 100 things? And I'm like, absolutely not. The book is structured in a way where you can dive in on tip 76, tip 22, and get the same experience.
Cool.
And so I really like that you can have struggles with your gut health one week and you can dive into that section. Maybe another week you're feeling lonely, and so you dive into the section about how to up level your friendships. Maybe another week you are feeling like you're just a little meh in your life, you want to be a little bit more productive. We have a section for that. So I think of tools as something, and even habits. I think that people sometimes feel like failures when they start a habit and they don't stick to it forever. And I think of habits and tools as something that can serve us in the times in our lives where we need them. And then we can evolve in new habits and new tools as we learn and we grow and we change, and our lives grow and change too. And so I really wanted the book to stand with people through that journey, and that's to my experience, different tools have served me at different points in my journey. So the tools that are serving me now are even different than the tools that were serving me a few months ago, but I'll highlight a few of the ones that have been really helpful for me recently. There's a tip in my book that you reminded me of with your neurofeedback, because you can actually have a similar experience, not exactly the same, but on your own at home. You can rewire your brain to think more positive thoughts on a regular
Okay.
basis. And this is something that I have been doing on a daily basis, especially recently. I feel like it's the winter. I just
Yeah.
need more of that. I've been having a little bit of a mental health hard time recently, so it's been really helpful. So this is from the work of Dr. Rick Hansen, and it's super, super, super easy. Basically, all you're going to do is you're going to notice something good. It can be, my cat, I
Sure.
notice my cat all the time. I'll be like, I love my cat. And then you're going to really amplify the feelings of that good thing. So I'm going to be like, oh, her little ears are so cute. She smells so good. I love the way her fur feels. This can be an ice cream cone you're eating. It can be a great conversation you're having. I could do it right now with you. Wow, this is such a great conversation. I feel so connected. She's asking great questions. You're going to amplify those feelings, and then you're going to sit in them for 5 seconds. And you can literally just count to 5 as you're amplifying those positive feelings. And what that's going to do is it's going to make that neural pathway in your brain stronger and more cemented into your brain. And when your brain is looking for neural pathways to take, it's going to take the ones that are the most strong, the most cemented in. And so instead of all of these other thoughts that you're having, the stress and the self-hatred and all of these things that go through our
Sure.
head on a daily basis, we're countering that with some intentionally planted positive neural feedback paths for our brain to take. And it can have really, really powerful effects. So the next time your brain is looking for how to respond to something, how to feel in a moment, in those microseconds that we are not even aware of, it's going to be more likely to take a path that's going to make you feel really good.
Wow, I love that because I think that, sometimes it's so frustrating. Like, I don't know, maybe it's because I live with a mental illness, but it's so frustrating to always hear people say, oh, it's the power of positive thinking. You just have to be positive. Like, look at the good in life. It's like, well, yes, but sometimes you want to feel I believe in feeling all the feels. I believe in it's good to feel sad. It's good to feel extremely happy. It's good sometimes to feel a little manicky because it gets, your juices flowing. I feel that there's stuff in moderation, right? And it's all about like having a big collectiveness of emotions. But I do find myself focusing on something and going negative and spiraling super quickly, right? And like not even meaning to, but it's like that doomsday situation, right? So I think this is such a great way for someone to and a free way, because it's not free neurofeedback therapy. Unfortunately, it's not covered by insurance. So this is a great free, easy way to amplify, like you're saying, those feelings, like something as simple as like your cat or my dog or my baby or ice cream or conversation. It's so true. I mean, I get super buzzed when I leave. Not every conversation is as fabulous as we're having, but I get super buzzed and excited when I have great conversations like this on the podcast. And it makes me just like so excited for the rest of the day. And I feel like I'm go getting and I can just do anything. And it's right. It's because I'm excited about that. And now I'm just going to hold on to that feeling and grow with it. And I think that's what great advice. I really
Well, and
love that.
again, we're not saying that the boulder is going to move. The
No.
boulders are still being there. And I think toxic positivity is saying, like, ignore the boulder. The boulder's not there. That's fine. Whatever. Who cares about a stinking boulder? And all of the resources that I'm sharing are saying the boulder is still going to be there, but we can interact with the boulder
Yes.
differently.
No. Oh my gosh. I love that. What has been your favorite, like most surprising guest that you've had on your podcast that you've loved? I mean, I ask this only to podcast people because I feel like, it's always a gamble, right? Like you have no idea what the person's going to be like. And you're like, "Oh, I don't know. Is this going to be like and sometimes you have false expectations where you think like, oh, this is going to be the most like incredible interview. And you're like, you were kind of a bore. Like,
For sure, for sure. Okay, I'll share two that happened recently. One was a podcast with Dr. Sue Varma, and it's called Anyone Can Become More Optimistic. Here's
okay.
how. And that one really surprised me because she's this incredible psychiatrist. She was actually the director of the mental health
Oh,
center at
wow.
the World Trade Center after 9/11.
Wow.
And so she was dealing with people who were dealing with immense levels of trauma, and that formed the basis for her work. And she was like, if I can help these people find optimism, I can help
Sure.
anybody find optimism. And that episode really surprised me because there are very simple things that we can do to actually increase our base level optimism. Again, to the things that we're talking about, I'm trying to increase to bring my base up so that moment to moment, I'm not having to be like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I want to bring my baseline up so that happiness, that good feelings come with a little bit more ease throughout my day. And she really helped me do that. She shared a ton of different resources in that episode. A few that I really like. One is that exercise can increase your sense of purpose, and having a sense of purpose can increase your motivation to exercise. So it's a really cyclical
Wow.
relationship. And if you can just kickstart that relationship by doing a workout, and it's not saying that the working out is going to be your purpose. It's literally saying there's research that shows people who exercise will feel a greater sense of purpose in their day-to-day lives. And purpose is a really critical part of feeling more optimistic on a day-to-day basis. So a great way to kickstart that cycle is to just get in a little bit of movement.
Wow, I love
thought
that.
that was and it's so easy. It's so actionable. Another thing she talks about, I love micro habits. I talk about micro workouts all the time. And she talks about micro connections. And so those are those little moments where you're passing a stranger on the street and you smile at them, when you make a little bit of conversation with the person who's helping you check out your groceries, when you just have these little micro interactions with other human beings. And research shows that these micro interactions have a really powerful effect on our sense of optimism, on our sense of well-being, on our sense of calm, and our sense of happiness. And so it's reminded me to take that extra second, instead of having my headphones on all the time when I'm moving through the world, to really like look up at people and to smile at them and to have a little conversation with
Sure.
somebody who's next to me in line at the grocery store. That's been a really helpful reminder
I
for
think
me as
connection
well.
is so important, and it really makes you realize that you're not alone. And I think that so
Yes.
many people, including myself, have been in moments where a smile or a "how are you really" can truly affect my entire day. And you never know what someone's going through. So, I love that little micro connection really can just amplify just such great positive feelings, and not the toxic positivity, which I love, about that. That's so
No. And then,
wonderful.
well, and and I'll say the
Yeah.
second one in a second, but to that point, there's actually research that shows that human connection is the single biggest predictor of health and or of happiness and longevity in the long term. There's a study from the Harvard School of Adult Development, which is the longest running study of human health and happiness. And Dr. Robert Waldinger, I had him on the podcast. He's currently the director of this study. It's been going on for more than 80
Wow.
years. So they've actually had to switch out directors because it's been going on for so long. But he's the current director. And the single biggest predictor of health and happiness is our human relationships, is the strength of our connection. So I think that's such a powerful fact for actually applying to how we live our days. Often we'll
Sure.
treat our moments of connection, our time with other people, as a reward for everything else that we've done in our day, even health habits, or obviously our work. We all have to go to work every single day, other than the weekends, sometimes the weekends too.
Yeah.
But we're like, oh, I have to get through everything on my to-do list, and then I can have the human connection. And I think once you know the fact of the human connection is the single biggest predictor of our health and happiness in the long run, it becomes not something that's a reward for your to-do list, but something that needs a primary place on your
Right.
to-do list. It should go up in our priorities significantly more. It should be scheduled on our calendar so that we're not missing it. And that's been really powerful for my perception
Wow.
shift around that as
Wow. Oh
well.
my gosh. I love that. I also am mind blowing that it's been going on for 80 years, that research. Because that's a long time, and
It's
that's
so
a lot of
cool.
different directors that they'd have to have go in there. And I mean, it just shows the commitment to trying to find that, you know what I mean, and figure it
Well,
out.
imagine being the person who's like, I'm going to quit it now. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like now that it's been going for so long, they kind of have to keep
Or
it
they're
going,
like, oh
'cause
my
they're
God,
like-
sorry, he died and we lost everything.
Yeah, I feel like they're like, we gotta keep it up. And then the second one I want to mention is so on Mondays we do like a little bit of chattier episodes. We interview celebrities. I do solos, things like that. And we did an advice episode recently with Heidi Gardner, who's from SNL. She's incredible. And I knew she was this incredible comedian, but she gave a level of advice that just like blew my mind. And I love getting to know people in different ways. I think especially with public
Yeah,
figures, we often see them in a very singular way. We make them into this picture of what we want
sure.
them to be in our minds. And I love getting to uncover the dynamic people behind that. And so that was a really fun, surprising interview for me as well. Her advice was just like incredible. She taught me how to like sports. Uh, she also gave great advice for getting over breakups. She gave great advice for living in the moment, public speaking, and being comfortable with yourself in front of the camera or doing silly things, embodying your whole person,
Wow.
even if that person is like a little bit silly. It's so much deeper than I thought it would be. And it was really pleasant for me.
I love those because I feel like I've been an actress, I feel like my whole life, so I don't know any different. But so many people, I admire and I'm in awe of, and I meet them and they end up being asshole. So it's very hard. They never say meet your idols, don't meet your idols. But sometimes you have to in this business. But I think that that's really cool when you see, and you're right, we give these celebrities, these larger than life people, super singular things, like this is what they are, like this is who they are, and then you meet them and you're like, oh, they're nothing like that. They're like cooler than you thought that they were, and they have all this awesome advice. So I think that's really fun. I'm going to definitely check out that interview. I also saw that you did Jesse Tyler Ferguson, who I think is, I
Yeah.
don't know him at all, but I think that he's so wonderful and so sweet and so funny, and so
He is. That episode ended up for me being, I almost called it a masterclass in
mm,
empathy because I feel like he just has this really beautiful empathy that he's developed both as an actor, which I
yeah,
think empathy is a critical part of
100%.
being a good actor. And I actually think it's a really cool part of your guys' jobs is that you get to practice empathy professionally. Like I think that's a really beautiful
I never
thing.
thought of it that
Um
way. That's really cool. I like that. Yeah.
I think it's really cool, but also as an activist, and he really has developed a sense of empathy for people who disagree with him and people who don't see the world in the way that he does. And I think that is so
Oh,
needed
so
right now.
powerful.
And I found it incredibly helpful because sometimes I have a harder time with
Yeah.
that.
Oh, that's so powerful. I love that. So, my big question for you is, how did you decide? I mean, you've had all this information, you've been interviewing all these people, but what made you decide to be like, you know what? Now I want to be an author. I think it's such a huge step, and it's something that I've like thought about because I have notes all over my house. Like I have, it's like it's like
Like a beautiful mind.
it's like I don't know if it's beautiful, but there's a mind there, But there is stuff everywhere, and I've had all these ideas and of something for kids for postpartum, like all this stuff, and
Mm.
but it's the actual like sitting down, actually doing it. So what was it for you that you were like, you know what, this is so needed, and this is the step that I must take, and I must commit and follow through with this.
Yeah. So I think I always think in writing because I've been a writer my entire
Yeah,
life. So I view everything else as almost an offshoot of my writing. I think that writing is still the core of who I am. I call myself a podcast host now, if you asked, but I still think of myself at my core as a writer. And I really wanted to create a resource that people could utilize. My
mm,
podcasts are so packed with information, and I'm so glad they exist and will continue to explore all of these topics and evolve in real time and all of these things. But it's really hard to be like, oh, I heard something really fascinating at minute 37 in the podcast. I'm going to go back and
yeah.
reference that when I need it. I really wanted my book to be an encyclopedia of the tool, so you can just
A
flip to the
go-to
section. I want to
guide,
have more
yeah, a go-to
confidence. Yeah, a
guide.
go-to guide. We like a handbook. You leave it out on your coffee table. You leave it on your bedside table. You can use it when you just need motivation in
Sure.
general, or you can use it to solve a specific problem or overcome a specific hurdle. And it's so easy. You can read everything in 5 minutes. I hear from new moms all the time that it's the only book that they can get themselves to read because you don't need to retain
No.
anything. You don't need to have be 50 pages in and remember the previous 50 pages. You just dive in, you read for 5 minutes while the kid is
Yeah.
napping, and then you go about the rest of your day.
Honestly, that's the exciting part for me of a book like this is if my baby's not on my boob, like then she's running around and I have to watch her. So when she's there, that's the time.
How old is
She's
she?
19 months. She's older, but yeah, I mean, I can't remember the last time that I picked up a book other than if, someone was coming on and I scanned through it really quickly, like for an interview, because it's so, you have no idea that there's no time. And
I have an idea. I mean, we do a series on the podcast called The Pros and Cons of Having
yeah.
Kids. And it's because the series was developed because I don't know whether or not I want to have kids because there's so many,
Yes.
people who say like literally there's just no time. You have no, I don't know how you fit a whole extra human being into my life already. So like, you're like, you have no idea how little time you have. And I'm like, I have thought
Yeah.
constantly about how
No,
little time you have and it
it's
scares
it's
me.
it's a terrifying thing because it's something where I was like, I always wanted kids. Like I always knew that I wanted one. Like I'm an only child, so I knew like I knew I wanted one. But it was one of those things where also I was like, oh, I'm not on a job right now, so I could imagine what it's going to be like when that happens. When I do my podcast episodes and I, edit them myself and she'll come in and her little like, grimy fingers will press a button and delete everything and then you have to start over. That happens about, I'd say, once every like 3 weeks. So
Oh my gosh.
yes, it's it's the best joy ever, and she's an easy baby, and I got very, very, very lucky. Like that, it does not happen. But the thing is the way that it works for me is like she comes with me everywhere. Like she's a part of my life. Like she comes to my events. Like she comes to dinners. Like she doesn't sleep till like 10:30 at night anyway, so she wants to come along and wants to party, so she comes with me. I'm making it sound like my daughter's like having a martini out at night, like she's not. But
No, but Jesse talked about that in the interview with him. He also said that he wanted to have his kids fit into
yeah,
his lives and not vice
yeah,
versa. And I think he was like, my dad hated that I said that. But I think it's a really powerful concept. I think
it
that
is.
saying I'm not going to make my life completely adjusted to, obviously it's a big adjustment, but I'm going to fit my kids into my life is a really powerful
Well,
concept.
and I think, look, and the way that I say this is it's not for everybody, right? It's not, kids are not for everybody, and the way that I raise my daughter is not for everybody. Some kids thrive on the I need to go to bed in my night suit at 6 o'clock and get my 12 hours, and then I get up at 6, and then no, my daughter, like, I have to be like, okay, come on, babe. Like, let's wake up. We co-sleep together. Like, she sleeps in between my husband and I. Like, she stays out late. She's a ball of energy. We're both Gemini, so I feel like that's probably why.
Oh my gosh, your poor
Yeah, I know.
husband. Geminis.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. But I think that it's important that I'm that she fits in my world, and I like that Jesse says that too because she's my best friend, and we do everything together, and I still take her to her classes. She has her ballet, she has music class, but everything is like
Wait, so I'm going to ask you what I asked Jesse
yeah,
too. And one of the questions I ask often on this series, which is we can see all the hard things, not all of them maybe, but a lot of the hard things are really evident, like the time commitment, the money commitment, the lack of sleep,
yeah.
all of these things. What is the good thing that makes all of those hard things worth it? What makes the trade worth it?
See, I don't find any of those things hard. What I find hard for
Oh.
me, I love that you're asking this question. Thank you. What I find the hardest part about motherhood is not my baby, it's the judgment of people. And I find like sometimes it feels like you're back in high school, right? And you're like the kid that just moved into the school and you're like, oh, you have to meet new friends because guess what? Your friends will be there, your old friends, and they'll show up. But at the end of the day, like they're not going to come with you to the music class. They're not going to come with you to ballet. They're not going to come with you to interview 30 million different Montessori preschools when they're all the fucking same. You know what I mean? Like that's just the truth. And you get very judgmental parents that are like, oh, you're still breastfeeding? Like she's too old. Why are you still doing that? Or, oh, you don't have a nanny. Oh, you don't, want to put her in this because maybe you can't afford this. I find that has been the hardest struggle. And it's, and finding, a new group, a new base of a friendship is like starting over. It's like starting in high school. And I've
Mm,
been very lucky that I've met people through the neighborhood, walking around, in my neighborhood, meeting different moms and people from my past that I wasn't necessarily super close with, but I knew them. And now, because we raise our children very similarly, we've become very close. So I
mm,
think that that's the hardest, is just the stresses and the noise. And I would say noise of family too, because some of my family doesn't understand the things that I do for my kids and why I'm fully invested. They're like, you need to go out. Like, you need to like put her to sleep, like have a nanny. Like, and I'm like, oh, I have such anxiety that if I leave her for 5 minutes, something's going to happen. But try explaining that to some stranger, or try explaining it to someone that doesn't understand, you know? So that's
yeah.
what I have found has been the hardest part of motherhood, is finding a judgment-free zone and finding that comfort of like starting over again, because you're starting anew. Yes, finances are hard with kids. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't have a job right now. Like, it's very hard, but I feel like it wouldn't matter if she was there or not, because that's just a struggle that I feel like we live with every day. Yes, it's added, but right now there's not really much that you're paying for with a baby. You know what I mean? When it,
So then, if those are the hard things for you, which I do think it sounds so hard, I mean, I know people are just looking for validation of their own
yeah.
choices. And I tell myself that as somebody who's on the receiving end of not nearly as much as mothers get,
No,
I'm
but
sure, but a
that's not
tiny
true.
sliver from the internet. People, no, I
Trolls
just
are the
think that
worst.
yeah, the amount of people who even comment on, I get comments all the time from people who say that if I'm contemplating having children, then I shouldn't have children.
Okay.
Or I said
What
once that
losers.
I was interested in having a child to have the human
Yeah,
experience of it. I said the most appealing part to me is this type of human
sure.
experience. As somebody who, I'm sort of like I'm very experientially ambitious. I want to have as experience rich of a life as possible. And I said that, and I got messages from somebody who is like, "Well, you're clearly selfish. You shouldn't have a kid because you want to enrich your experiences. You should have a kid because you want to devote everything to them." So I'm on the receiving end of that a little bit. And
Oh,
I
people are
do.
so
I
stupid.
have empathy for the fact that, again, everybody just wants validation of their own choices, and that's why they're
Yeah.
doing it. But it's hurtful, and it's also hard not to let one negative comment supersede 5 million
Yeah.
positive comments. That's just the way that our brains work. We have a negativity bias. That's neuroscience. So given all those bad things, though, what is the good part?
Oh,
Like,
everything.
what makes it worth it for
Everything.
you?
She's my best friend. She's so funny. She makes me laugh all day long. She does the most ridiculous things, and you're just like, "How are you a human?" Like, this morning I woke up and I said to her, everything is like at the stage of like no, no, no. Like, that's a new thing. Like, and she doesn't know what she's saying. She just says mostly not no. She mostly says, "I know, I know, I know." And you're like, "Okay." But then this morning I was like, "Oh, do you want to go on a walk with Gogo?" That's my mom, but we call her Gogo. And I was like, because mom's going to do an interview. And she goes, maybe. And I'm like, what? Maybe? Like, where did you learn maybe? Like, so it's like little moments like that are so incredible. Like talking about Disney World. I'm a Disney adult. I will admit that.
Me too. I love it.
Amazing. Okay. So, like, I'm a Disney adult, being able to see Disney World, and like she met Figment. So, if you know who Figment is, like, if people don't know, it's like a character from one of the rides at Disney World, from Epcot, and it's this purple dragon. Okay. And she'd never seen him before, other than in this book that we have. We have a little book called Figment. It's like one of those little golden books. And she went on the ride and she loved the ride, and she put her hands up and she saw him afterwards. It was like a character. And to see the joy, and I don't mean like just joy, I mean pure joy, like pure angelic joy from
Mm.
something where, yeah, like, oh my God, it's a character, like how funny, right? And like inside, what that person's really like they're probably chain smoking, like backstage, like having a miserable time, like
I don't think at
I don't know.
Disney. I think it's pretty
Maybe
hard to
maybe at
get to be a Disney
Universal, maybe at
character.
Universal.
Yeah.
But you have this narrative like as an adult, right? Because we're so jaded and we've lived this life, and to see pure joy, it's this it hits your heart so hard, where you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe that we all used to be like this, right? And that's what it reminds you of. And so when people are, you're on a go back to a plane, you're on a plane and someone's annoyed that a baby's crying, like, remember, like, you were that baby that was crying. Like, you know what I mean? Just remember that. But I would say, it's the pure joy of this being that's so close to this sounds kind of grim, but I don't mean it to be grim, but it's the closest thing to whatever you want to perceive as a heaven or another side, or, it's the other end of the spectrum of
Mm.
like, as we get older, we get closer to whatever you believe in. I don't care if you believe in aliens or whatever that is, that happens when you go away, um,
Mm.
they just came from there. Right. So it's the closest thing that we can maybe even feel like our ancestors are, or, other spiritual beings are around. Like, I'm very woo woo. My daughter sees spirits all the time. I'm in her nursery right now recording because it's the quietest place, but her lights flicker all the time. And especially when she was first
Mm.
born in the first like 6 weeks, I have videos where I would ask questions and it would flicker a certain light. It was wild. Like, I don't know Morse code, but I almost like feel like I need to start like investigating what that was. But it was that thing of like, wow, like I saw my grandmother in her. I saw my grandpa in her. My
Mm.
my husband saw his, grandmother, because it's true. It's just it's there. There's this connection to another world that's just so pure and lovely. So that was a
And
mouthful.
you'd
I'm sorry.
still do it again? Would you still like, do you have any regrets given your postpartum anxiety and anything like
No,
that?
I
Would you
mean,
still like do it all
if
again?
if I was someone that knew I wanted to have more kids, which I knew from the beginning I didn't want to, but I 100% would do it again. I mean, I had a traumatic birth. I hemorrhaged. I was in and out of the hospital for 6 weeks. It was not pleasant. But would I do it all over again? Absolutely, because it's when you see such a pure soul, you're just like, wow, like how incredible is this? Like, that's and it's funny. I come from a family where there's a lot of adoption and stuff like that. So it's not about it's the narcissism of like, it's my baby and I see my genes. It's no, it's just these angelic beings, I feel like, that we see.
Mm.
And people can change so drastically when they have kids, for the good and for the bad. And when you see the ones that have changed for the good, and I've seen this with a lot of people in my life that I knew from a past life. Yeah, I'll say, like, maybe they weren't the best people, and now they have kids, and wow, it really changes you, and
Mm.
they've become such incredible humans because of their children. Like, so, it's not for everyone. I'm not a pusher of a baby. I was an only child. I plan on Lady being an only child, but if it's something that you feel called to do and it happens, like, wow, how cool. Like, what a fun human
Yeah.
experience. Like, and guess what? Sherlock's, like, it is a human experience. Like, that's what it is. Like, and if you want to do it, something that was interesting that I think you'll appreciate is my dog that was like your cat, I'm assuming, like my best friend, and he was there for me when I had my first panic attack and was my emotional support. And the reason why I called my show Emotional Support, because that I always referred to him as my emotional support animal, and like, he did everything. He actually passed away. He had a seizure and then a week later had another one, but he passed away in my arms with my daughter in the car seat next to me and my mom driving. And it was I get chills still, because it was this weird experience where I was like, wow, I'm saying goodbye to something and I just said hello to something else. Like, and it was this weird
Mm.
thing. And I'm like, oh, he was 15. And I was like, he couldn't be on this earth anymore because he couldn't
Mm.
protect her or me the way that he used to be able to. And like that, I know it's like gut wrenching. And it's like, kind of like, I don't mean it to be grim, but it was this moment of like, that's what makes it worth it, right? Because you feel so much
Mm.
deeper for certain things than you ever thought that you could before,
Mm.
and he almost knew like he couldn't leave till I had something else, like, because I needed that, I needed that support. So whatever your choice is and whatever you feel, and with modern science and with beautiful adoption and all these choices, like age is just a number at this point, um for me, I was a geriatric pregnancy. I'm 36. So, I mean, that was really fun to hear all the time. But, if you can ignore it, um, it's a wild ride. But I mean, if you feel called to do it and you want to have that human experience, I say go for it. It's fucking great. Like, like, it's awesome, The good definitely outweighs any stress or negativity. That's what
Hmm.
I would say.
Well, that's nice to hear. I do
That's a
feel
long-winded
that was
answer.
a very
Sorry.
that was a very good answer. It was a very good answer, and I
Okay,
receive it.
good. Well, I have one final question before my last one. I want to know, what was it like having the experience with Hoda and Jenna? Because I'm a super fan.
They were very lovely. So you do like a prep call with the producers. They try to
And
really
this was
like
for your
make you
book, right?
feel.
That's why you came
This
on.
is for
Yeah.
my book. Yeah. They did a whole long segment just about my story and the book, which
Wow.
was really incredible. And so they try to make you feel like as not nervous as possible, which is really lovely. And then I got onto the set that morning. I flew in from California the night before, got onto the set that morning, and everything was decked out with like my book cover
Right, how they
art.
do that.
And
Yeah.
and I was just like, this is crazy. So Hoda and Jenna come in. They were so lovely. We chatted a little bit about Jenna's book
Yeah.
club before the segment started because I'm a
Yeah.
huge reader, and I think she does really good picks. Like I like her
Fantastic
picks a
picks.
lot
Yes.
for the book
Yes.
club. Yeah. And they're both so nice. And then we got into the conversation, and interestingly, like a minute in, they put their cards down, and we mostly just started like
Yeah.
talking. And all the producers were like, "Oh, that was such a good sign because that means they like
Oh.
enjoyed talking to you." And then we stayed and chatted a little bit afterward, and really talked about my journey, like how I started, what those first steps
Yeah.
were in terms of battling my
Yeah.
agoraphobia. Because I think they were really, it's interesting when you're on the Today Show and you're talking about I couldn't get out of bed. It's really a strong dichotomy in that
Sure.
moment, and they were very interested in that story. But they were both so lovely, so interested, so
Oh.
engaging, and you can understand how they have gotten where they've
Well, I
gotten.
mean, let me tell you, I've been a fan of theirs for so long, and then obviously when Hoda was with Kathy Lee, like I mean, I'm a super morning fan girl of watching stuff, and I record it and I watch it sometimes later in the day, like it's super
Wow.
super fan. But it really saved me because like I had said, I had such bad, I was immobile, like I wasn't allowed to. And also, I guess during my pregnancy, I wasn't allowed to work out or anything because I had a low placenta. So I was
Mm.
usually in the morning, I would be like, oh, let's go on a walk or let's do something. I couldn't do that. And so it really shows like the importance of, talk shows and podcasts. You feel such a connection to people, especially when you're in a really low place, because you don't feel
Oh,
like you're
yeah.
alone. And like, I always felt like I had my mornings with them and like we could laugh and like have a good time. And I would like, so there's something really comforting. So I think that that's what's so special, that you got to share your book on there and share with the
You'll
world.
have to tell them that when you
Oh, I love that.
go on.
When I like that. We'll put it out there. Oh my gosh. Oh, well, this has been so lovely. What is next for Liz?
So I'm super, super focused on the podcast right now. The podcast is my love. It is where I feel like I perform the best. It's my greatest good in the world in an Aristotelian sense. Um, and I also just think it's needed in the world to have these longer, more nuanced, more in-depth
Sure.
conversations. I think we're all craving that in this age where our attention spans have been completely hijacked by social media and by people trying to make money off of us swiping to next thing, scrolling to next thing. And so I'm a huge fan of podcasts in general, and I love my podcast. We have some really exciting guests coming up. We have some really exciting topics coming up. We have one about narcissism. It's funny that you mentioned that. We have a deep dive into like how to know if somebody is a narcissist and what exactly to do if they are. There's a lot more narcissists in our society than I was aware
I didn't
of.
realize it till I dated one.
Yeah.
Not my husband, one before. He's like, what?
That'd be a big reveal. Yeah. So I thought that was fascinating. And we also we have gut health, we have blood sugar, we have longevity, we have relationships, we have so many topics, and then also these chattier episodes. So we're working on getting as many high quality episodes out as possible. And you can find that at the Liz Moody podcast, wherever you listen to
So
podcasts.
my final question that I ask everyone is, Liz, what is your emotional support?
My husband, I want to say, and this is something I even hesitated as
Yeah.
I said it, because I always thought that healing had to be a personal process. And I think that it does to an extent. We still we can't rely on people to pick up
Sure.
pieces that we are not even trying to pick up ourselves. But something that I've learned recently is that emotional bonds can heal emotional wounds, and relational bonds can heal. Wait, let me say that again, because it's relational bonds. Something that I've learned recently is that relational bonds are the thing that heals relational wounds. So when we have wounds that are based on relationships to other people, these are attachment style wounds. They're often from our childhood. I have many. They can also be from previous romantic relationships we've had, from friendships that we've had, all these things. You can do so much work on yourself, and still the thing that's going to heal that is going to be your relationship bonds, the new bonds that you're building, the people who you're building that trust with, the people who are saying, I'm going to stick around even if you're messy, even if you're anxious, even if you can't show up for me in the way that I'm showing up for you, I'm going to be here no matter what. And my husband has really been such a core part of my journey to rebuild trust and faith and feeling confident loving people. And so he's really been a strong emotional support to me, both in the very specific ways of when I was dealing with my anxiety. He was always there for me. He still to this day is so helpful with it. But also just in the greater sense of knowing he's always going to be there, having that strong foundation has allowed me to spread my wings in my own growth and evolution in a way that I would not have thought was possible.
I love that. I love that you talk about it's the foundation. And I think that it's important, and not all of us can have that rock. And when you find that, that's when I feel like you really, the appreciation goes so far. And I think that that's so wonderful.
Well, and I don't think it needs to be a romantic relationship.
Oh, no,
either,
it could
but
be
to the point of talking
friendships
about Dr.
yeah.
Robert Waldinger's work, I think we need to invest in our relationships so much
Yeah.
more than we are. We need to invest in our friendships. We need to invest in our families. We need to invest in our romantic relationships. I think sometimes when we're like, oh, well, I didn't find my life partner yet, so that's not available to me. What relationships do you have that you could invest in that
Right.
way? And I think it's so important for our health, our happiness, how we feel on a day-to-day basis, our own growing, our own evolution, all of that.
Oh my God. I'm yes, and yes. This has been such a lovely conversation.